Thank you for tuning in. Tonight, I wanted to give something really quick. I know that nobody has time, Erev Pesach, to listen to 35, 45-minute shiurim, so I thought I'd put together something really quick just to contribute something to everybody's limud on this Pesach. And I wanted to simply talk about who wrote Kadesh U'rchatz. And this is one of those things that almost nobody ever thinks about. There's this poem, in case you're not familiar, there's this poem which most Jews know and sing, and we've learned it since nursery, called Kadesh U'rchatz, that enumerates in a mnemonic fashion the order of the Seder, which is almost an oxymoron to say order of the Seder or the Seder of the Seder, right? The order of the Pesach Seder is, what's the word? Enumerated in this very short, very simple poem that all of us have learned since we're really little. There's a song that some people will sing it at the beginning of the Seder, kids will sing it in nursery, and some communities like the Moroccans, they have this minhag to sing it three times at the beginning of the Seder. And the kids love it, honestly. It's kind of cryptic since it is poetic and it uses unusual grammar like Kadesh instead of Kiddush. Kadesh U'rchatz Karpas Yachatz. It might have actually once been Karpes Yachatz just to rhyme. Magid Rachza. Earlier versions had Rachatz Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tzafun Barech Halel Nirtzah. Very popular poem. So where does this come from, and how did it get into the uh, Pesach Haggadah? So the work on this was done by Rav Menachem Mendel Kasher. Menachem Mendel Kasher was the first to take note of these little poems that were mnemonics in order to remember the Seder of the Pesach night of the Pesach Seder. In his famous Haggadah called Haggadah Torah Shlema or Haggadah Shlema, this is available in most Jewish bookstores. This is a titanic work of scholarship. In his Sefer on Haggadah Shel Pesach, he devotes a couple of pages, I think specifically pages 77 to 82, on these little poems. He found no less than 14 poems in his time. I mean, he died in 1983. When he was writing this Haggadah, he found no less than 14 poems in the various manuscripts that he was aware of that were also mnemonics for the night of the Seder, such as Yekadesh Yitaher v'kapas v'chatzah v'doresh v'notel lelachem u'matzah umarov v'korech v'ochel pirusa v'nakeh v'yazamein yehalel b'ditzah, or Kadesh v'titkadash tivol u'pros v'darasht. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get that meter well enough right now. He has another one. Let's Kiddush Chitza Yirakot Cholek Keha Mozeg Haggadah Birchat Yain Netila Hamotzi Matzah L'Tayech Kiricha Fikomen Ma'im Achronim Nevarech. Some of these don't even sound like poems. They just sound like little, simanim, so to speak, mnemonics that were thrust into the Haggadah for people to just use these mnemonic little mind palaces to remember the order of the night of Pesach. However, for some reason, Kadesh U'rchatz Karpes Yachatz, that poem became the most popular, especially in Ashkenaz, and we find it in dozens of manuscripts, hundreds of Haggadot today, and in various versions. For example, here's one: Kadesh U'rchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachsa Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tamun Barech V'Halon Erza. Very similar, but instead of the word Safun, they decided the word Tamun was the right way to do it. We have similar ones that seem to be based on it as well, as this manuscript here presents. I would give credit here to the internet sleuths on X.com, or to formerly Twitter. A lot of the images here I have tonight is due to their ability to find things on the National Library of Israel's Ketiv website. But this is just an example of one, in addition to Menachem Mendel Kasher's, because we're still finding them. There's all sorts of these little poems, but for some reason, the most successful one was Kadesh U'rchatz Karpes Yachatz. So where did that come from? The credit, as far as we know, to finding the answer goes to Shmuel David Lozato, Shadal. Shmuel David Lozato was an Italian, Austrian Jewish scholar of the Wissenschaft, essentially a Jewish studies scholar who lived in Italy in the 1800s. And he has this, there's this book called Penine Shadal, on pages 148 and 149, there's these little blurbs that he writes with a little pro, little with some of his ideas. There's a whole list of different chapters there. And in that discussion, he mentions that he was given a paper by a friend that was a not a paper, a manuscript that was mouse eaten, rat eaten, and I'm showing a picture of it here because it was somebody on the internet finally found it. A rat eaten manuscript which contained the poem of Kadesh U'rchatz Karpas Yachatz. One of his friends, I think his name was Yaakov Formigini, gave him this manuscript. And he was really excited. He said, if you look in this manuscript, we find an attribution. We find an attribution to who wrote Kadesh U'rchatz Karpas Yachatz. And it was only somebody like Shadal with his brilliance and encyclopedic knowledge who could have really honed in on it, honed in on this. But in real tiny here, even though the entire page is mouse eaten, you see Reb Shmuel Mifalez. Reb Shmuel Mifalez is the attributed person for this poem, and you see that only half of it even survived on the parchment. You see Motzi Matzah. I don't know if you could see the rest of it. Motzi Matzah, Shulchan Orech. I can't even make out the rest of that. But essentially, he declared that Shmuel Falez is probably, even though we're missing half of this mouse-eaten paper, was probably the author of this little, what do you call it? This little poem. Now, who was Rabbi Shmuel Mifalez? Shmuel Mifalez, Falaise is a place in France, in Normandy, so to speak. And Falaise, I believe, means cliff. It's a cliffside commune, which originally had a lot of Jewish scholars. And Rabbi Shmuel Mifalez was one of the 13th century Balei Tosafot. I believe he studied under Rabbi Chilmi Pari and many of the great Balei Tosafot. And in the book of Rabbi Ephraim Orbach, he has he has a lot of information about people like Rabbi Shmuel Falez and his entire circle. He was a scholar of renown and a very competent Bal HaTosafot. As far as we know, Orbach claims he is the Bal HaTosafot of Avodah Zarah. The entire tractate of Avodah Zarah, the entire Masechta, that's a compilation of his Tosafot, his additions, his commentary to the Gemara. Now, there are actually not just, this is not the only thing that Reb Shmuel Mafalez is famous for from the Haggadah Shel Pesach. There's three topics about Pesach, which makes Reb Shmuel Mafalez, or Shmuel from Falez, which has his name circulate when it comes Pesach time. Number one is, of course, this, Kadesh U'rchatz. Since Shadal discovered this manuscript, everybody attributes the Kadesh U'rchatz to Shmuel Mifalez. Okay, beautiful. He wrote the poem. For some reason, this poem got lucky, and this poem became the most widespread and known one. But what else is he known for? He's also known for the attribution of Chasal Sidur Pesach Kihilchato. Right at the very end of the did I take an image of it? I did not. But at the very end of the Haggadah Shel Pesach, there is this little poem, Chasal Sidur Pesach Kihilchato. And of course I'm going to forget the words because it's late at night and I'm tired. But I'm sorry, words escape me. The attribution of that poem was also a mystery. Yet Shmuel Mafalez wrote a pirush, a commentary to another poem from Rabbi Yosef Tovelam. Rabbi Yosef Tovelam wrote a poem called Elokei Haruchot Kol Basar. And in that piyut, it's basically a special piyut for my words are escaping me because it's late at night, but it's a special piyut for Shabbat Hagadol. Elokei Haruchot Kol Basar is this special poetic portfolio which is added to the Chazarat Hashatz on the Shabbat before Pesach in order to teach everybody the halachot of Pesach. So Rabbi Shmuel from Falez, he wrote a commentary on this poem. And his commentary goes all the way to the end of the poem. And at the very end, he has a commentary on the words Chasal Sidur Pesach Kihilchato. So it became clear, especially when we got even more manuscripts of this, that Chasal Sidur Pesach Kihilchato was a part of the longer poem from Rabbi Yosef Tovelam, and that's where it was taken from. It was taken from that poem, from that longer poem that was always said on Shabbat Hagadol, and it was put at the end of the Haggadah Shel Pesach. That's another place where he's mentioned. The third place where he's mentioned is in context of the Minhag of Kitniyot. There's a lot of discussion of this Minhag of Kitniyot in the Rishonim, and in the Or Zarua as well. He mentions Rabbi Shmuel from Falez offers his opinion, and he believes that the entire minhag is a minhag ta'ut. He believes that it is a mistaken minhag. He's not so forceful to say that it's a minhag shitut, that it's like a minhag of stupidity, or to say that it's from the karaim, something like I think the Rush said that, this is probably a karaic minig. It's not Jewish, and dismiss it entirely. But incredibly, even though he believes that it's a minhag ta'ut, he defers to it. And he says, even if it's a mistake, because it's a minhag avotenu, and this is the minhag, a person should refrain from eating kitniyot um, on Pesach, and even Bitsina, even if it's privately, a person should not eat kitniyot on Pesach, since he's among other people. The majority of Jews where he is do not eat kitniyot. It is appropriate for a person to not eat kitniyot on Pesach, even if the minhag is mistaken, which is a brilliantly interesting piece of history. Just to for anybody who studies halacha, for that kind of um, opinion to develop among the Baalei HaTosafot, that a minhag can persist or should persist, even if it is mistaken, that is a very and that's just a very interesting position to take halachically, and it had tremendous ramifications. How that kind of position evolved, again, is a different rabbit hole, but it's a very interesting conversation to have at your seder table, whether or not your minhag is to eat kidneyot or not to eat kidneyot, whether you believe it is a good minhag and not a good minhag, whether you believe whatever your belief of the halachic aspect of it, the custom aspect of it, and I hope you have the opportunity to look into it this Pesach. But it is really interesting that the Baalei HaTosafot, like Reb Shmuel from Falez, could develop this idea that custom, even if it's mistaken, should and could become halacha. So that is all. I hope everybody has a Chag Sameach. I hope I've contributed something towards your Simchat HaChag, and I will see you all after Pesach.